S. Srismitha, Professor of Pathology, Sree Balaji Medical College. I have over 10 years of teaching experience for undergraduates as well as postgraduates, 11 publications to my credit as well as 2 ongoing research projects. Today, I will be discussing about red cell disorders and bleeding disorders. I will just giving you all a brief overview of these diseases. So, the learning objectives of this session will be to understand the general features and classification of anemia, describe the major types and causes of anemia, and review the common hereditary and acquired hemolytic disorders. In addition, we will have a brief classification of bleeding disorders and discuss von Willebrand disease as well as bleeding disorders. So, what we go to the general features of anemia. First, let us see what is the definition of anemia. Anemia is defined as the decrease in the hemoglobin and hence the oxygen carrying capacity of blood specific for the age and sex of the patient. Clinically, these patients will present with pallor, lassitude, dyspnea on exertion, and some patients in severe cases may develop glossitis, koilonychia and pedal edema. In case of hemolytic anemia, the characteristic clinical findings are the presence of jaundice, splenomegaly, cholelithiasis as well as leg ulcers. Anemia can be classified in 3 types based on the morphology, based on the severity as well as based on the etiology. Morphologically, anemias are classified as microcytic anemias, macrocytic anemias and normocytic anemias. This is based on the mean corpuscular volume. If the MCV is between 80 to 100 femtoliters, we call it as normocytic. If it is less than 80 femtoliters, we call it as microcytic, and more than 100 femtoliters is called macrocytic anemias. The prototype for microcytic anemia is iron deficiency anemia. In addition, we can have thalassemia and sideroblastic anemia also presenting with microcytes. Normocytic anemias are mostly because of blood loss. Macrocytic anemias, the prototype is megaloblastic anemia. In addition, liver disease, hypothyroidism as well as alcoholism can produce macrocytic anemias. Based on the severity, it is classified as mild, moderate and severe. Hemoglobin less than the lower limit to 10 grams per deciliter is mild anemia, 10 to 7 grams per deciliter is moderate anemia and less than 7 grams is severe anemia. Etiologically, we can classify anemias due to impaired red cell production or due to excessive red cell destruction. The most common anemias due to impaired red cell production are iron deficiency anemia and megaloblastic anemia. Hemolytic anemias are further classified as anemias due to intrinsic abnormality and anemias due to extrinsic abnormality. The anemia due to extrinsic abnormality, the prototype is autoimmune hemolytic anemia. Intrinsic abnormalities can be due to defects in the red cell membrane or defect in the hemoglobin or enzyme defects. If there is a defect in red cell membrane, it is hereditary spherocytosis. If there is a quantitative defect in hemoglobin, it is thalassemia. A qualitative defect in hemoglobin is sickle cell anemia, and enzyme defects will lead to glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. So, let us see a little bit in detail about iron deficiency anemia. Iron deficiency anemia is the most common anemia that we come across in daily practice. It is caused by chronic blood loss or insufficient dietary intake, or it can also be due to malabsorption. These patients present with fatigue, pallor, pica and glossitis. Morphologically, the red cells in these patients are microcytic and hypochromic. We can also see ring cells, elongated cells and also teardrop cells in the peripheral blood of these patients on peripheral smear examination. The bone marrow shows micronormoblastic maturation and absent iron stores in pearl stain. And we can go for iron studies to confirm these findings, where there is a low serum ferritin as well as transferrin saturation and increased total iron binding capacity. The second most common cause of nutritional deficiency anemia is megaloblastic anemia. It is caused by impaired DNA synthesis due to vitamin B12 or folic acid deficiency. A special type of megaloblastic anemia is pernicious anemia, where there is a deficiency of intrinsic factor. These patients will present with neurologic symptoms in addition to the symptoms of anemia, and these include glove and stocking deformity as well as tingling and numbness in the hands and feet of these patients. Peripheral blood shows macrocytic red cells and hypersegmented neutrophils along with Howell-Jolly bodies and Cabo ring formation. Bone marrow shows ineffective erythropoiesis and abnormal megaloblasts in addition to stab forms and cells with abnormal sieve-like chromatin. The diagnosis can be confirmed with the presence of serum levels of B12 and folic acid levels, where you can see that it is reduced. Thalassemia is an inherited disorder where there is a mutation which causes either a reduction or complete absence of alpha or beta globin chains, and this disrupts the hemoglobin balance and causes severe hemolysis in these patients. Clinically, it can be classified into thalassemia major, thalassemia minor and intermediate. Thalassemia major is the most severe form of thalassemia, which presents in early childhood with severe anemia and hepatosplenomegaly. And they also have characteristic skeletal abnormalities like mongoloid facies and crew cut appearance on X-ray. Morphologically, in the peripheral blood there are microcytic hypochromic cells, target cells and nucleated red blood cells due to ineffective erythropoiesis. The bone marrow shows erythroid hyperplasia, micronormoblastic maturation and increased bone marrow iron stores. The diagnosis can be confirmed with hemoglobin electrophoresis revealing abnormal hemoglobinins. In addition, we can also go for genetic testing for globin gene mutations. Hereditary spherocytosis is a genetic red cell membrane defect where there is a defect in the proteins spectrin and ankyrin. Because of the defect in the proteins, what happens is there is a severe reduction in the surface area of these red cells. So this leads to the transformation of the biconcave disc into spherical structures, and these spherical structures are less deformable, and when they pass through the splenic sinusoids, it will lead to sequestration of these cells, and that will cause destruction and chronic hemolysis. So because of the hemolysis, the patient will clinically present with jaundice, splenomegaly, anemia and reticulocytosis. Peripheral smear will show the presence of reticulocytes as well as increased number of spherocytes and microspherocytes. And this can also be confirmed by osmotic fragility test, which reveals an increased osmotic fragility. Next, we move on to sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia occurs due to mutation in beta globin, which causes sickling, hematologic damage and multi-organ complications. So in this condition, what happens is hemoglobin A is replaced by hemoglobin S. So this hemoglobin S, when the red cells undergo deoxygenation, will undergo sickling. In deoxygenated states, the red cells will undergo sickling. So these sickle cells, when there is another period of oxygenation, they will revert back to normal and form normal RBCs. But repeated cycles of oxygenation and deoxygenation will produce irreversibly sickled cells, which will undergo splenic sequestration causing hemolysis and also autosplenectomy. These sickle cells can also cause microvascular occlusion in the vessels, that is the cause for chronic leg ulcers in these patients. On the peripheral smear, we can see sickled erythrocytes, reticulocytosis, and this condition can be confirmed by hemoglobin electrophoresis, where we can demonstrate hemoglobin S. The bone marrow in these patients reveals marked erythroid hyperplasia with expansion of the bone marrow and extramedullary hematopoiesis. Next, we move on to autoimmune hemolytic anemia. Autoimmune hemolytic anemia is an anemia where there are antibodies which target the red blood cell antigens and destroy the red cells, causing hemolysis. It can be classified into warm antibody type and cold antibody type. The patients will present with anemia, jaundice and splenomegaly, which is the classical triad in this case. The diagnosis is based on a positive direct Coombs test which confirms the presence of autoimmune red cells, and peripheral smear shows spherocytes. In addition to spherocytes, we can also see autoagglutination or increased rouleau formation in case of these autoimmune hemolytic anemias. So, with this we come to the end of anemias. We move on to the classification of bleeding disorders, followed by a small discussion on von Willebrand disease and hemophilia. So, bleeding disorders can be classified based on the hemostasis effects as primary hemostatic defects and secondary hemostasis defects. Primary hemostasis is generally because of platelet abnormalities like thrombocytopenia or a qualitative defect in the platelets. It can also be because of von Willebrand factor deficiency or vessel wall abnormalities like vasculitis and scurvy. Secondary hemostatic defects mostly involve the coagulation factor deficiencies, the most common of which are hemophilia A, which is factor 8 deficiency, and hemophilia B, which is factor 9 deficiencies. We can also have acquired causes like vitamin K deficiency, liver disease and disseminated intravascular coagulation. Typically, primary hemostatic defects, the patient will present with petechiae, purpura and epistaxis. In case of secondary hemostasis, it is deep tissue hematomas and hemarthrosis. So, a little bit about hemophilia. Hemophilia is classified as hemophilia A and B. Hemophilia A is factor 8 deficiency and hemophilia B is factor 9 deficiency. Both of them are X-linked recessive disorders. So, based on the factor activity, they can be classified as severe, moderate and mild. If the factor activity is less than 1%, it is severe hemophilia. Between 1 to 5%, it is moderate hemophilia, and mild hemophilia when the factor activity is between 6 to 40%. The major pathogenesis involved in hemophilia is the deficient fibrin formation, which impairs secondary hemostasis, causing deep tissue bleeding. Clinically, these patients will present with hemarthrosis in the joints and muscle hematomas. These are the most common clinical manifestations. These patients may also present with excessive bleeding after trauma or after surgery. And in cases of severe hemophilia, the patients can also present with intracranial bleeds. In the laboratory, we can see that the platelet count, the bleeding time and the prothrombin time are normal, but there is a prolonged APTT in these patients. The complications of this disorder include development of inhibitors to factor 8 or 9 and chronic joint arthropathy apart from recurrent bleeding episodes. Next, we move on to von Willebrand's disease. So, what is von Willebrand factor? It is nothing but a carrier protein which stabilizes factor 8. It mediates platelet adhesion via glycoprotein 1b. So, when there is a deficiency of this von Willebrand factor, the patients will develop von Willebrand's disease. It is classified into 3 types, type 1, type 2 and type 3. Type 1 is partial quantitative deficiency and type 3 is severe quantitative deficiency. Type 2 is qualitative defect in von Willebrand factor. Clinically, whether it is type 1, 2 or 3, the patient will present in the similar pattern with mucocutaneous bleedings which presents as easy bruisability, epistaxis and menorrhagia in these patients. The patients can also have prolonged bleeding after dental extraction or after any surgeries. So, on laboratory examination, what we see is a normal platelet count, prolonged bleeding time and abnormal PFA test. In addition, there is also a reduced ristocetin cofactor activity which confirms the von Willebrand dysfunction. And there is also a mildly prolonged APTT levels in these cases, sometimes due to a decrease in factor 8 along with von Willebrand deficiency. With this, I come to the end of this session. I'll meet you all next time with another interesting topic. Thank you all.